Before we get started, I'll ask Rich Burton, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We've got a pretty good turnout tonight, I'm happy to see, on the evening of Pearl Harbor Day, that infamous day. And for all you Navy personnel in the room especially, observances to you, but for all veterans and for all Americans, just remember tomorrow is a pretty important day. And we lost one of our fellow usual visitors, Joe Lockhart, recently, whom you may know was was the original radar operator who gave the early warning of the Japanese raid on Pearl Harbor. And I hope you've had a chance to chat with him over the years here, because he's just a delightful guy, and his description of what happened. And of course, they were on the other side of the hill; they couldn't see the devastation, but they certainly gave the warning, and the warning wasn't heeded properly, and all hell broke loose, as you know. On that happy note, do we have any first-timers in the room this evening? Thank you. We'd like to welcome you. And I hope you've all got your notices, and anybody who wants an email notice or a postcard notice gets them. Charlie does a wonderful job getting them out, now that he's responsible for all of it. Thank you, Charlie Lloyd. It's the last meeting of the year, and it's been a good year. We've had some terrific speakers, as you know. Thank you all to your attendees, especially the World War II veterans and all other veterans, and a word of gratitude for all the wonderful speakers. Do we have any World War II veterans with us this evening? Show of hands. God bless you. Thank you so much. You heard that, John. That's what it's all about. We're here to celebrate and respect the World War II veterans. A couple of announcements. Rick McCann, where are you? Here he comes.
Good evening. Those of you who've been here over the last couple of months know that I've been talking about the Oral History Project, which is a partnership with the Army Heritage Center out of Carlisle to interview veterans, primarily World War II veterans, but also veterans of the Korean conflict, Vietnam conflict, and all the way up to recent conflicts that we've been engaged with. We have trained 12 Lower Dolphin students. The education director from the War College came down and worked with those honors kids there, gave them the forms, gave them some instruction on how to do oral histories, and they're ready to go. So we have to be ready to go to help them out. Last month I had a sign-up sheet, and it got waylaid right at the very beginning of the meeting, and so it didn't circulate. And I'm going to start that at the back this time. Keep it moving, okay? And what I'd like you to do, if you're a veteran, is sign that. That doesn't mean you're signing up for anything, or I'm going to sell your name to replacement window outfits or something like that. But if you could sign on there, we'd like to get a feel for veterans. I'm talking about of any of the armed services. If you could sign up on there. And then the last column on there is if you would be interested in participating in the Oral History Project. So the kids are anxious to get going with it. They're excited, they're trained, and we'd like to get this thing underway to preserve the history of you veterans. And since we're in the holiday season, Christmas season, I'd like to wish everyone here, but especially the veterans, a Merry Christmas, because I know many of you ladies and gentlemen spent Christmases overseas, away from the family. So, Merry Christmas.
Thanks, John. I'm the record. Thanks, John. Okay, Richard Burton, you want to talk? Okay, Richard Burton did leave a notice about his Vietnam roundtable, and this is an important thing to kick off, as we don't know of any other one in the country, so it's, I think it's kind of a heroic effort of yours, Rich, to get it going, and I wish you great luck with it. Does anybody else have anything of Laura?
Please.
Laura Paswell.
All right. We were given a whole bunch of these posters, and I brought several tonight. The person who donated them said, well, you can just hand them out. People can just take them. But if people would give the World War II Round Table a couple of bucks, that'd be nice too. So if you're not finished with your holiday shopping, there are probably 4 or 5 different campaigns out there. Help yourself. If you want to drop a couple bucks in the helmet, that would be great. If not, Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Laura. Which brings me to the next topic, to remind you that this is a totally voluntary organization. We don't charge admission. We do accept contributions, and you'll find the Friendly Helmet Committee available to you at the end of the show. Say again? Yes, absolutely. Your name, please?
Dave Klein, Peter, WW2. I'm particularly interested in the November the 7th, December the 7th, for a particular reason that most Devians wouldn't have any connection with. My mother was on the dedication of this memorial over there. Why? She was national president of the American War Mothers Association, and the government took her over at their expense and brought her home. So to me, this is like most of you. You have a couple little high spots in your life that you like to recall, and I just wanted to share that with you. I had the pleasure of my mother being over there at the dedication of it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was also my parents' 3rd wedding anniversary. Okay. We have more than one special person here tonight. Besides our speaker, we have Monica Van Domenek, who's from the Patriot News, and we haven't had a lot of outside publicity. We've done what we can, so we're thrilled to have her here, and I'm sure that her 6-page article will be nothing but complimentary. Welcome, Monica. Next month meeting, January 3rd. So we hope you recover nicely from New Year's Eve. Frank Stevenson, 45th Infantry Division, Battle of Anzio, among others. He's a friend of Glenn Schott's. Glenn Schott will be bringing him. He's 90 years old. He's from Warnersville, Pennsylvania, and he'll be sitting right here telling us his memoirs. So that ought to be a pretty good night. Tonight's speaker is John Nevola. I'm sure you've seen the announcements on him. He's a military historian, widely published author. His topic is The Last Jump, which is a historical narrative of the U.S. airborne operations in World War II, plus some background information of how we got there. And just out of curiosity and personal interest, how many airborne troopers do we have in the room tonight? 1, 2, 3. Do I hear 4? Well, this will be special to us anyway, and I hope you all enjoy it. John's book, The Last Jump, in July, was rated #1 in the historical fiction category on Amazon.com. On November 13, 2011, it was named Best Book of 2011 in the historical fiction genre by Brands and Stars and Flags. So this is a guy who obviously must know what he's talking about and how to say it. So please help me welcome John Nevola.
Thank you all, thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Capillary World II Roundtable for inviting me here tonight. It's really my pleasure to be able to speak in front of groups of veterans, and so before we get started, I would just like to personally thank all the veterans and their spouses for all the contributions, not only from World War II, but in every conflict since. So give yourselves a hand. Coming in here tonight, I saw a bunch of kids and the spirit of Christmas running around, and they were looking for presents. It reminded me of a story of a teacher who had some students bring up Christmas presents, and the baker's daughter brought up a box, and he opened it up, and there was a cake, and he was really happy about that. And then the teacher pointed out to the florist's son, who brought up a bouquet of flowers, and the teacher was happy about that. But she couldn't wait to get to the liquor store owner's son, and he brought up a box, and the box had a little dripping on the side, so rather than open the box, he tasted it, and he got wine, and the son went, no, he's only 8 years old, and cognac? Well, what is it? A puppy. The last jump is a historical novel, and what it means is the history is dead on, solid, perfect, all the correct historical figures are in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. Only my interpretation of the conversations is what changes it. And the story behind it is draped over this historical background. So you have a bit of a history lesson, a bit of a mystery, a bit of a love story, a bit of an action-adventure story, all kind of wrapped up into one. And so today I'm going to take you through how the book evolved, what it was like to be in America in World War II, how the story unfolds over time. And I'll be using a lot of facts and figures to bring home some points about contributions of African Americans in World War II, women in World War II. And so in order to make sure you all pay attention, I'm going to give away this book at the end of the presentation. And I'm going to give it away for the person who correctly answers the question that I'm going to ask. And I'm going to ask that question based on some of the information that I give you. So you can take out your pencils and papers now if you want to get yourself a free book and start writing down some of the answers. We're going to talk about the home front, who served, why it's different than what we see today. As I said, women's contributions, they worked in the factories, they worked as ferry pilots. Sir? Am I using a microphone? I think I am. Oh, could I use the microphone? Sure.
We got something there.
Got it. Is that better? Great. I neglected to tell you that this presentation takes about 45 minutes with questions, about 2 hours without questions. So I'm going to leave it up to you. If you have a question, just raise your hand, shout it out, and we'll make this interactive. Beginning of World War II, this country wanted no part of what was going on in Europe. We had the 14th largest army in the world, and while President Roosevelt was trying to assist Britain in surviving the assault from the Germans, he was also worried about what the Japanese were doing in the Pacific and China. There was no way this country was going to voluntarily get into a war. And he promised American mothers he would not send their sons overseas. So we were not prepared at the beginning of World War II. But December 7th changed everything. Once we were in the war, we were behind. We were behind the 8 ball. We were so far behind all of the other warring powers that we had to take some extraordinary steps. Food was rationed, gas was rationed, tires, all kinds of metal was rationed. There were scrap drives. There was melting down cannons that were in front of city halls all over the country from the Spanish-American War and from World War I, until the government had to finally say, whoa, we can get enough material to do this without melting down the history of our country. And the government asked the people to plant victory gardens. And they asked for 5 million victory gardens. And the people of this country planted 20 million victory gardens. And they planted them every place. On baseball fields and flower boxes, on lawns in front of City Hall. Wherever you went in World War II, there was something growing during the growing season. Who served back in that time frame? Everyone served. Actors, can you imagine Michael Moore serving in the military today? I couldn't imagine that. But actors served, and some of those names you're familiar with, and probably some of those names are a surprise. We all probably figured Charlton Heston served, but Rock Hudson, Paul Newman, Tony Curtis, some of the most famous stars in Hollywood at the time were in active duty. Sons of privilege. Teddy Roosevelt Jr. was the son of a president. He served. James Roosevelt was a Marine Raider. He was the son of a sitting president, Franklin Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. Of course, we all know about PT-109. So there was no distinction in World War II about who would serve and who would not. Everybody felt their obligation, and everybody stepped up and served. Baseball players, over 500 baseball players served, as well as sports stars from every other sport. And so here are some of the highlights of some of the names of people who served. Women's contributions was enormous during World War II. The men were all fighting, and there wasn't enough labor in the country to build up planes and ships and tanks and guns that were needed to supply the fighting forces. So women served in every conceivable job all over the country, doing every conceivable kind of work. In the book, that's historical fact. In the book, we have a number of women characters who are building aircraft carriers at Newport News shipyard in Virginia. And so we bring in a little bit of the Pacific flavor by documenting the kinds of aircraft carriers that were being built and what women's contributions were. They also built airplanes that were given some tough jobs because of their small stature and small hands to climb inside the frames of some of these planes to do the wiring that bigger, huskier men with bigger hands couldn't actually get. Many women signed up for the military as WACs and as waiters. And they found jobs as administrative assistants, secretaries, code breakers. Many women had that knack for the numbers and finally given an opportunity to exhibit their intelligence and brain power. And as nurses, and as a matter of fact, 16 Purple Hearts were awarded to nurses in combat areas in World War II. And I saw a bunch of people writing down 16. That's good. That's good. Women's air service pilots. One of the characters in our book is a ferry pilot. Women's air service pilots ferried the planes that were built in the factories to the bases that they needed to go to. At the beginning of the war, there were not enough trained male pilots to both fight the war and to ferry the newly built planes. And so the government allowed some women who already had pilot's licenses to start a pilot program to prove that they can actually perform this mission. And once that was proven, they opened up a school. They had 25,000 applicants, of which 1,000 eventually won their wings. They flew 12,000 missions. That is from point to point in 78 different types, which is about every plane that was ever built in this country. 38 died in the line of duty. They did so without military benefits because they weren't officially part of the military, and they did it at 2/3 the pay. As a matter of fact, the true story was a certain special Air Force, Army Air Forces unit was established. And their job was to take the best pilots, the best mechanics, the best bombardiers, the best navigators in the entire United States Army Air Forces into one unit and to train for a special mission. Now, the problem with that was that there was a fly B-29. And the B-29 was known as a widowmaker because the engines would catch fire. It was one of the most sophisticated planes ever built, one of the most difficult planes to fly, and in the early stages scared the living heck out of, all the men who were in this special unit. So the colonel in charge had a brainstorm. He went to Kansas City where they were building B-29s. He had 2 Wasps check out on the plane and fly the plane from Kansas City to Wendover Air Force Base, Utah. He lined up his men in a hangar and he ceremoniously welcomed in his B-29 beautiful silver plane, circled the airfield, came down, touched down to a smooth landing, taxied up to the hangar. The hatch popped open and 2 ladies jumped out and walked up to the men and said, "Here's your first airplane." Well, he didn't He did not have any trouble with his men flying the B-29 from that day on. That colonel was Colonel Paul Tibbets. That mission was the atomic bomb mission over Japan. So the contribution that women made just to get that special unit off the ground is substantial, fairly substantial. And during World War II, African Americans were segregated, were not allowed to participate in combat units. But in spite of that, 1.1 million served in this breakout. I'm sure many people are surprised to find that 17,000 African Americans served in the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps was very segregated at the time. The thing was, they trained someplace else. They never trained in Paris Island. They trained at Montfort Point, and so they called themselves the Montfort Point Marines. They unloaded the ships, basically. They were the stevedores that unloaded the ships in the combat areas, and at times, of course, had to pick up weapons and defend themselves. There were no medals of honor awarded to any African American in World War II of the 432 that were awarded. And part of the story of the book revolves around that fact and what took place in 1997 to remedy that. These are some of the units that were experimental at the time. The 97 Infantry Division was an all-black division. White officers served in Italy. Red Ball Express were the truck drivers that drove the supplies over the Normandy beaches and supplied Patton's army as well as everybody else's army for the first 90 or 120 days until Antwerp was finally opened. The 761st Tank Battalion was the most highly trained tank battalion. They trained for 3 years in the United States because nobody wanted to send them over to fight until Patton realized there's a tank battalion sitting back in the States that I certainly could use. He brought them over. He said, I don't care what color you are, as long as you kill Germans. And they killed Germans. The most interesting story, though, and the one that is undertold, because I'm not really going to tell you any story today that's untold, but there are some stories that are undertold, the story of the 5th Platoons. Toward the end of 1944, the casualties in Europe were enormous. And Eisenhower had a problem replacing his infantry losses. He searched around the states, he cannibalized other units, the Army Special Training Programs and the units in training, and he patched together as many infantry replacements as he could, send them over to Europe. It still wasn't enough. Then the Battle of the Bulge occurred, and there were 80,000 more casualties. Now there was a severe shortage of infantrymen in Europe. So General Lee, the second in command and the general of the Service of Supply, had all the black troops working for him, offered a solution. He would train black troops as infantrymen and send them to fight, but no white commander, no division, no general wanted to take black troops and integrate them into their units. So what they decided to do was to train them and put them into a rifle company as a separate platoon, segregated, separate platoon. They had to give up their stripes in order to volunteer. Now we're into 1945. They had to give up their stripes in order to volunteer. 2,200 volunteers, 53 platoons were formed. They went out to 9 infantry and 2 armored divisions, fought for 2 months. The war ended, and instead of being able to stay with the units they were assigned to, they were disbanded and sent back to the Service of Supply. Toward the end of the war, this racial thing got a little bit looser, and in terms of trying to provide opportunities for men to serve in combat, and they developed an all-black parachute infantry battalion called the 555th or the Triple Nickels. They really finished training just as the war ended, so there wasn't a mission for them. They didn't have anything to do. But the Japanese had been sending over balloon bombs from their island in Japan to the Pacific Northwest for a couple of years by that point in time. They sent over 9,000 of them. They were made out of rice paper. They had detonators and sophisticated armaments underneath them, and they'd fly the jet stream, and they'd fly for like 10 to 14 days, and then they would release these balloon bombs, these detonators over the forests. And they were hoping to set the Pacific Northwest on fire. That was the Japanese plan. But all they really succeeded in doing was being a nuisance. But they didn't know that. But one day, they dropped a bomb and it killed five people from a church outing, counseling 4 kids. And so the Army brass got anxious about it, and they assigned to Triple Nichols the job of jumping into the Northwest Forest, putting out fires that these balloon bombs started, and deactivating the bombs that didn't explode.
Sir,
Yes?
during the World War II in Europe, wasn't there an air wing of entirely black fighter pilots?
Yeah, it was the 332nd Fighter Wing.
I didn't see it up there, that's why I was asking.
I think I might have altered off the previous slide, but it's called the Tuskegee Airmen. And they're pretty popular, pretty well known, because there's been a movie and a TV special made about them. And they trained on P-40s and wound up flying
They
P-51.
never lost an airplane.
Their claim is they never lost a bomber to enemy action that they had escorted. That's correct.
That's not true.
Probably not, but that's the claim.
No one else.
So the story is draped over all of these backgrounds. Medal of Honor, black servicemen getting the Medal of Honor in 1997, Special Council of World War of Congressional Medal of Honor winners and infantry commanders set up a special panel in 1997, made a recommendation to award 7 Medals of Honor to black Americans in World War II, 6 of them posthumously, 1 was alive. The real life person was an infantry lieutenant named Vernon Baker from the 92nd Infantry Division. He fought in Italy. My character that represents Vernon Baker is called Lincoln Abraham, and he flows through the entire story, so we capture that flavor. We have, as we said, we have some WASP pilots in there. We have a couple of factory workers building aircraft carriers. The 2 protagonists, the 2 main characters, are paratroopers who start out in the 82nd Airborne Division and hate each other, and finally transfer to the 101st and become closer than brothers. So the 101st history is represented, the 82nd Airborne history is represented. The cousin of one of these 2 characters is an infantryman of the 29th Infantry Division, the Stonewallers, that's the 116th Infantry Regiment. They led the attack at Normandy. They were the spearhead. They were nearly wiped out on Dog Green Beach in front of the revealed draw. And you probably remember that scene from Saving Private Ryan. That was the 29th Infantry Division, 116th Infantry Regiment. So we have that part of the battle represented through that character. We have 2nd and 5th Rangers represented. Point du Hoc scaling, the defense of the Point du Hoc after the scaling, and the German effort to try to take it. We had to take the point back. We deal with the invasion of Holland, the airborne invasion of Holland, or Operation Market Garden, and finally the Battle of the Bulge. So all of these units are represented story-wise in the book. Here are some of the reviews right now. The book has 91 as of yesterday. I think it's 93 as of today. 5-star average reviews on Amazon.com. Lieutenant James Magellan is the most decorated infantry officer of the 82nd Airborne Division. He's 95 years old, spry and chipper. He gave me a quote. There's a guy by the name of Ed Lang, who's an infantry soldier from the 84th. He lives here in Johnstown, PA. He's a friend of mine. He gave me a quote. Red Falvey just passed away this August. I'm sure some of you know Red from his 90th jump in AHEC in Carlisle last year. Passed away this past August. Gave me a quote, and I got a quote from this is just a few among many that we've received. And so my journey to say thank you to all the veterans of World War II in this story and with this book has taken me to a lot of places that I never thought I'd ever get to see. My wife and I went down to Charleston, South Carolina, to the Patriots Point Museum. and spent some time aboard the USS Lexington, and I'm sorry, the USS Yorktown, the second Yorktown. We were at the Bedford World War D-Day Memorial, spent a day there. Can't spend a day there without a tear coming out of your eye. Of course, the World War II Memorial in Washington, D.C., and almost every place in Pennsylvania that had a World War II event. We've been to Carlisle, Indiantown Gap, Reading, Altoona, etc. As Kirk mentioned, we received we were an award finalist for the Forward Magazine Best Book Award in 2010, and Stars and Flags Best Historical Fiction Book in 2011. And in July, we were rated number one book, customer rated number one historical fiction book on Amazon. We're number 10 now, and I just can't seem to get past Gone with the Wind. I don't know what we're doing wrong, but we just can't get past Gone with the Wind and Lonesome Dove. So I normally don't sell books, and when we speak about the books, but I do have some here today. They make great gifts to veterans in active duty, and since it was Christmas time, Laura convinced me that I should bring some books for sale. They'll sell for $20 each. Some of the proceeds that we get from this book, we've been doing this for 2 years now, donated to the Freedom Line Scholarship Fund. Freedom Line Scholarship Fund pays college tuition for the sons and daughters of the fallen. So the people who have lost their lives in Afghanistan and Iraq, who have kids growing up or of college age, are getting scholarships from this fund, and we contributed almost $10,000 to this fund today. There are 240 kids on scholarship, and in addition, I wanted to say thank you to World War II veterans and veterans of all wars, and writing a book that's a tribute to them, and making sure that people spoken for who can't speak for themselves, and that they're never forgotten and will always be remembered. We wanted to do something more meaningful, and so we're contributing this money to the sons and daughters of the fallen. Are there any questions? Sir? Yes, it was. It's all in Norfolk. And ex-Governor Tom Ridge. There was an event in Philly a year ago with Dave Efron and Bill Garnier, and the cast of the Band of Brothers movie theater. Not the whole cast, but James Matteo, who played Conti, and Frank John Hughes, who played Garnier, and Ross McCall, who played Liebgott. Those three stars were there. Kurt Schilling was there. Governor Ridge was there. I think that was about it. It's for the World War II Foundation. They were raising money for the Winters Memorial statue that went up in Saint Marie Dupont on June 6th of this year. And so I got an invitation, and I went and I took my daughter, and she took the pictures. And fell in love with James Matteo, and who wouldn't, right? Any other questions, sir?
What's your military background?
I served in the U.S. Army in 1967, 66, and 67. I spent most of my time here in the United States at Human Proving Ground in the meteorological support of weathers testing. Sir?
Are there any second or 101st Airborne in the audience?
I don't think so. I think Kirk asked that before. Any 82nd or 101st Airborne in the audience?
Normally there is one, he's not here this evening. There's some of us who are airborne qualified, but we were not in either of those divisions. We were in other special operations groups.
Well, we spent a lot of time researching those divisions in the first book. In the book I'm working on now, we're spending more time on smaller units. We're going to talk about the 509th, which is one of the first airborne divisions the first airborne division into combat in North Africa. We're going to talk about the 551st, which was slaughtered in the Battle of the Bulge, and all those records were missing. So there's a little bit of a mystery going on with that battalion. But there were 4 independent parachute battalions during the war, and the second book is going to deal more with those than with the big divisions.
Are there any 9th Air Force here?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
9th Air Force, are there any here?
9th Air Force, anybody here from the 9th? Well, if there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you. Oh, wait a second. I can't leave yet. Sir?
Somehow or other, I got the impression that this talk would be specifically about the last parachute jump in Europe, the jump across the Rhine. And it's my impression that that was pretty much a screw-up from the get-go. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about what the screw-up was all about, who made the decision to make the jump, and what was the objective of those that jumped.
17th Airborne Division, and I believe the 6th British Airborne Division made that jump. That jump was made in March of 1945. It was Monty's last hurrah, if you will, to jump the Rhine and get into Germany. The front had been collapsing up all up and down the line. Patton was already in Germany. There was very little resistance. The Germans had turned their back on the Western Front pretty much to fight back the Russians. But Monty decided to do that anyway, and he jumped into a town called Wesel that was occupied by a couple of panzer divisions, and they got pretty beat up in that attack. That was the last large-scale jump of the war. I don't know how that impression was given. This title refers more to the end of life of how a paratroop is defined when they leave this earth. Anybody have anything else to add on the 17th? I saw you nodding your head. And
Well, you have a gentleman over there who flew a C-47 and showed gliders in with horses.
on Operation Varsity. Anything to add to that?
C-47.
It's kind of fortunate we were flying the C-47. The guys that flew the commandos, if you see C-50s, didn't have self-sealing. C-46, they didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks. They took a beating. And the aircraft took those planes out. Sir?
I would like to recommend to all of you who, when you go, there was a whole list of memorials. Some of you have been to, especially around the D.C. area, there are quite a few memorials of World War II and so on. Well, one that was up there, you may have missed it, was the D-Day Memorial in Bedford, Virginia. Bedford, Virginia was chosen as the D-Day Memorial on Normandy because this is pretty close to factual, out of about 21 men from Bedford. The 21 men from Bedford who served in the Army, 17 of them, to my knowledge, died in the invasion or shortly thereafter. And that was why Bedford, Virginia was chosen. Bedford geographically is located in the southwestern part of Virginia. It's a beautiful ride. It's a beautiful memorial there. I've been there twice. One was on the original dedication. And they have it's just such an interesting place to see. And it is geographically located about 15 miles from Roanoke, Virginia, on east of Roanoke. So if you take vacations or you go in any place, it is a wonderful place to take your family and relate to your own military experiences.
Hey, it's called Overlord.
Exactly right. You know
It's
why?
called Overlord.
You know why?
For the first day of D-Day.
That's what
That's what we
Overlord
we initially called.
Eisenhower named that Overlord. You're exactly
It is a
right.
beautiful memorial. It's a whole lot nicer than the one in Washington, D.C.
It's a whole lot more emotional.
Huh?
It's a whole lot more emotional
Yeah.
than the one in Washington, D.C. The 29th Division was a National Guard
I love
division.
that scale that they have of the invasion over the bridge.
Right.
Beautiful.
The 29th Division was a National Guard division. The Bedford Company, A Company, was mostly Bedford boys. There's a book out by Alex Kershaw called The Bedford Boys, which would really give you a good history of that. But that's the reason why they built it there. You're absolutely right, because they took a disproportionate amount of casualties on D-Day for the population of the town. Almost the entire company that came from Bedford was wiped out on D-Day. Is there another hand?
Mine.
Well, I have another thing to do before you leave. I would like to know if anybody remembers how many WASPs died in the line of duty. So I need a hand because I'm going to pick the wrong guy. 38. I got 38 up here. Sorry.
What was the highest declaration awarded to a woman?
I'll be in the back signing books if anybody else is interested. You've been a great audience. Thank
John,
you.
I've got a question. We got a little time left, I hope. Of all the stories in your book, historically, background, you've done a tremendous amount of research, obviously. Do you have one that stands out in your mind as something that you didn't expect to find, or that was particularly interesting or memorable?
Well, I didn't expect to find the story of the WASPs. I didn't expect to find that it was so difficult for the women to get permission to help this country when there was nobody else to help. I mean, the pilots were all going overseas or in training, and the planes were lined up in the factories and they couldn't get to where they were going. And the people in the government were saying, you can't fly a plane, you're a woman. And finally, when they finally proved they could do that, and flew missions into Alaska and unauthorized missions into Europe that they weren't supposed to fly, that are not in the history books, and took up all that slack and made it all work smoothly, when the pilots started coming back from overseas, in December 1944, they deactivated the WASPs. Just like that. And no military benefits, no thank yous, ma'am, goodbye, just you're done. I was surprised at that. But
And any combat stories that stand out?
the combat stories that stand out. Just to wrap that, let me think about a combat story. The Pointe du Hoc mission was an interesting mission. They climbed these cliffs, and everybody knows about that. They took the guns weren't there. They found the guns later, they blew them up, and that's the end of the story. But it's not the end of the story, because the Germans wanted to retake Pointe du Hoc. And there was this ranger company, highly depleted, with a lot of casualties, cut off from everybody else on Normandy, had to defend that. And they defended it for 3 days against constant German counterattacks. And using all kinds of tricks and all kinds of devious methods, but with the most amount of bravery that you can imagine, standing in the face of these constant attacks. That's an undertold story of World War II.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there were more casualties after they took the cliffs than there were in the climbing of the cliffs.
Absolutely. And one company who was supposed to relieve them came up through the Normandy beachhead. It was a 5th Ranger Battalion, second platoon of A Company, and they come into they got through the Normandy defenses because they happened to land in between two strong points. And they got inside, and then they said, well, we're supposed to meet the rest of the battalion here, 5th Battalion. And this Lieutenant Parker waited, and he waited, and he waited. He goes, we must have missed him. So then he heads off for Pointe du Hoc. Well, he shows up at Pointe du Hoc. He thinks he's the last guy there to reinforce this 2nd Battalion. He was the only platoon that made it there. So there's those kinds of stories of individual heroism and initiative and what happened on D-Day. They were all very surprising as well as uplifting.
Yeah, we were there with Laura Pasquale's group this year. If you haven't been there, it's hard to grasp the total essence of it, because these poor bastards, not only did they land sort of in the wrong place because of the tide and whatnot, but they did have to scale a pretty rough-looking cliff. And then, much to their surprise, what they were supposed to do wasn't there. The guns weren't there, but they did find them later on. But then they just had to sit and wait to be lifted out of there. And it alone is a book. And so I would encourage you all to figure out how to get there. It's pretty impressive. Laura will take you. Charlie?
You know what the highest decoration awarded to a woman was?
In World War II?
Yeah. You know?
I really don't.
I'm surprised because of your interest in the airborne. The Distinguished Service Cross was awarded to a female OSS officer, personally by General Donovan, who was a Medal of Honor awardee from World War I.
Now, was that military or?
Oh, yes.
Donovan was civilian.
No. Donovan was...
Colonel Donovan, okay.
Yeah, when he was commander of the Office of Strategic Services.
Right, got it.
And I've met, most guys with a combat star on their jump wings, but the most you'll ever see from World War II is 5. Except I met one guy, he had made 17, but he was OSS.
Well, the two protagonists in this book, just because you mentioned it, each had 5 jump stars on combat stars on their jump wings. They did Sicily, they did Salerno, they did Normandy, they did Holland, and they participated in varsity as observers and to help out a friend who was short a couple of jump masters. So there are two guys with 5 jump stars. I tried to make them unique because, hey, they're my heroes. I got to make them unique. Right?
Anybody else? John, you certainly whetted our appetite, and not to make a crude commercial message, but I have peeked at the book and I find it's pretty darn good. So it's too bad you only bought a few, because I'm sure they'll go. But thank you so much for coming all over from New Jersey, being with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, one quick question. You know anything about this movie that what's his name, Di is filming about the airborne operations after the submarine leaves? It's a battle to capture the Lafayette crossing.
Oh, the Lafayette Causeway?
Yeah.
No, I actually, Di's on my Christmas list. I send him a card every year. I'm still waiting to get an answer. So the next time he answers me, I'm going to ask him about that.
Somebody's told me it's already filmed, ready for distribution. It's filmed in Hungary.
No, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
Lafayette Causeway.